questions or comments? So we're, of course, focusing primarily on this Shamatha practice in the first half of the retreat. Shamatha practice is the practice of cultivating a calm, clear, focused mind, developing our attention skills, developing this single point of concentration. And we saw there that there are three qualities we're cultivating on the basis of relaxation, improve stability of attention, and on that basis improve clarity of attention. And the objects we're using in this retreat are the breath, the mind and awareness. Of course, there's one of many different possibilities you can use, but I think these three are particularly suitable for us in the modern world, and each one of them has its own unique benefits. The tools we use, of course, we saw there that the two main tools is the rope of mindfulness to tie the mind to the object, and then the hook of introspection, quality control to monitor that, to notice if we're becoming dull or distracted. So there's one last point I want to cover in terms of the actual Shamatha practice, and that is the faults. So we can see that in the next page of your booklet. So the top sentence, the sentence at the top of the page says, Shamatha is attained by progressing through the 9 stages. So the 9 stages are these 9 stages on this windy road that we're going to start to have a look at this evening. So Shamatha is attained by progressing through the 9 stages, relying on the 8 antidotes to abandon the 5 faults. So here we have a little table with the 5 faults and the 8 antidotes. So let's have a look at those. So the first fault is laziness. This actually has 4 antidotes. So like everything in our life, if we see no benefit in an activity, then we're going to be, of course, very lazy when it comes to doing that activity. We're just not going to do it. No benefit. So similarly here in this practice, if we don't really appreciate the benefits of this practice, if we're just doing it because someone told us to do it, I think we're not going to do it. We're going to be very lazy. We're not going to do the practice. So therefore, the first antidote is faith. And that is to develop faith in the practice, understanding the benefits. Faith that this practice is going to really give us a lot of benefits. And we saw some of those benefits briefly yesterday evening. So of course, some of the immediate benefits we get from this Shamatha practice is that our mind will become more calm, the body will become more calm, the mind will become more clear. We'll find that we'll have less stress and agitation in our life. We'll be more focused and effective in everything we do. And then, of course, at a little bit deeper level, you'll find that the mental afflictions, this is something that's going to come up more this afternoon. Mental affliction is a translation of the Sanskrit term klesha. And kleshas is defined as anything that agitates or disturbs the mind. And so some examples of mental afflictions, of course, are craving, attachment, anger, hatred, jealousy, fear, anxiety, and so forth. These agitate and disturb the mind. And what you find, of course, is that doing this Shamatha practice, you'll find that they'll less likely come up. In fact, there's a very nice quote here from great Indian Buddhist master Shantideva from the 8th century. And he says, "Those with a distracted mind are trapped in the jaws of the mental afflictions. Meaning, if our mind is very distracted, we are predisposing ourselves for these mental afflictions to more likely arise. So you will find, and we know this a little bit from our own experience, if you have a more calm, clear, focused mind, then it's a little bit more difficult for these things to come up. And so that's going to be one of the side benefits of this practice, is that you find you'll have less mental afflictions coming up. So you're going to have much better mental balance. And as we briefly mentioned, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow in the context of observing the mind as the object of shamatha, is that now we tend to be the slaves of our own mind. We tend to be tormented and overwhelmed by our thoughts, emotions, memories, and so forth. And by doing this shamatha practice, we'll become the masters of our own mind instead of being the slaves of our own mind. Particularly doing the practice that we're going to be doing tomorrow, observing thoughts and emotions and so forth. Because if we can observe our thoughts, emotions, and memories and so forth, we're free of them. They can't do anything to harm us. So in fact, this shamatha practice is very much a healing practice. It starts to really heal the mind. And we really will become the masters of our own mind instead of being the slaves of our own mind. So of course that's an enormous benefit for this practice. And of course at the deepest level, what we saw yesterday was that this shamatha practice is the basis of Vipashyana practice. And Vipashyana practice will enable us to eliminate mental afflictions and suffering. So this shamatha practice is really the doorway to that. It's the doorway to us eliminating our craving, attachment, jealousy, anger, frustration, fear, anxiety, and so forth, and overcoming all suffering. So if we reflect on these benefits, we're going to have the first antidote, the faith that this practice is going to bring us enormous benefit. The more that we have faith in the practice, that it will benefit us, the more we'll have the second antidote of aspiration, the more we'll want to do the practice. And the more that we want to and aspire to do the practice, the more enthusiasm and effort we'll put into the practice, the third antidote. And then the more enthusiastic and effort we put into the practice, the more we'll have the fourth antidote here called pliancy. Pliancy means flexibility or serviceability of body and mind. Now our body and mind are not very pliant or flexible. We have a lot of aches and pains in the body, and we have a lot of resistance in the mind to the practice. But as we do this practice and get deeper into the practice, both our body and mind will become more pliant, more flexible, more serviceable. And what that pliancy really means at the highest level, we'll look at, I think probably tomorrow evening. So that's the first fault, laziness. Second fault is forgetfulness. This can mean forgetting the instructions or forgetting the object. And so, of course, the antidote to forgetfulness is mindfulness, is to remember the object, to hold the object. Then the third fault here is laxity and exaltation. Laxity is the sort of technical term here for dullness. And excitation is the most common form of distraction. And we see this in your chart here that you've got. Is that often we get distracted by pleasurable things, the so-called sense pleasures that pull us away. And we see this in the chart here. If we look down the bottom, sort of left, there's a bowl of fruit, so that's taste. Beside that there's a silk cloth, so that's tactile. Above the silk cloth here we have two round objects, which are symbols, so that's sound. To the left of that we have a shell with some perfume in it, so that's smell. And then diagonally above that we have a round object which is a mirror, so that's visual. So these are the five sense objects that are the most common form of distraction. So therefore, instead of distraction, we often see this word excitation or excitement is listed as the fault here, because it's the most common form of distraction. So of course, the antidote to dullness and distraction, or laxity and excitation, is introspection, is monitoring, noticing if we're becoming dull or distracted. The fourth fault here is non-application. Non-application means we've noticed that we've become dull or distracted, but we don't do anything about that. So that's a fault. So the antidote to that is application, which here means basically fix it. Which means that if you've become dull or distracted and you notice that, then normally the first line approach is just reapply mindfulness to the object. So that's application. And then there's one last fault here called over-application, which for us as beginners is not a big issue, but it can become an issue once we get deeper into the practice. And over-application means that we're actually focusing on the object well, but we're unnecessarily adjusting our focus. So that's a fault. So the antidote to that is equanimity. And here equanimity means balance. Means our mind is already balanced, so just leave it as it is. So of course the saying here is, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So just leave the mind, hold the mind as it is because it's going well. So these are the 5 faults, these are the 8 antidotes, and as the sentence above says, that Shamatha is attained by progressing through the 9 stages, relying on the 8 antidotes to abandon the 5 faults. So if we use these 8 antidotes to abandon the 5 faults in our practice, we'll slowly move along these 9 stages to Shamatha. And we'll start to have a look at these stages in this evening's session. So that's the faults and antidotes. Any questions on that? Okay, so let's go back to the practice. So a couple more comments about the practice we're doing now before we go back to the meditation. So again, the object here that we're using in this Shamatha practice is the sensations of the breath in the area of the abdomen. Using that bare attention to just focus on the rising and lowering, the sensations of the rising and lowering of the abdomen as we breathe. So just a few more comments about that practice. Again, if we go to Attention Revolution on page 33, he says the following. When we began this practice at stage 1 with the primary emphasis on relaxation, generally the more relaxed we are, the more stable our attention can become. But that relaxation must be balanced with vigilance. Otherwise it will simply lead to laxity, sluggishness and unbridled daydreaming. Once we have established a foundation of relaxation, we can more strongly emphasize attentional stability. One way to cultivate attentional stability is to direct our attention downward to the sensations in the abdomen associated with the in and out breath. Mindfulness of the entire body is very helpful for relaxing the mind, but this technique of focusing on the abdomen, which is commonly taught in the Burmese Theravada tradition, can be especially helpful for stabilizing the mind. Many Buddhist traditions, including Zen and Theravada Buddhism, encourage the practice of counting breaths as a means of stabilizing attention, and this advice is found in Indian Mahayana tradition as well. The Theravada Buddhist tradition is based on the teachings attributed to the Buddha as first recorded in the Pali language, and it is focused on the attainment of one's individual liberation. The Mahayana tradition is based on the teachings attributed to the Buddha recorded in Sanskrit, and it centres on the realisation of Buddhahood for the sake of all beings. One Mahayana sutra, for instance, states, he's quoting the sutra, he says, "How do you correctly note with the power of mindfulness the in and out movement of the breath? You count them correctly." And then in the text he goes on to talk about a lot of different methods of counting. counting more often, less often, counting 1 on the in-breath, 2 on the out-breath. We can also use noting. So again, counting or noting, we can do according to what works for us. If you find that it's not helpful or necessary, you can leave it out altogether. Then the last point here, he says, you might be surprised to see how much discomfort arises in your body, even when your practice sessions are relatively short and your meditation cushion is comfortable. This is normal. Don't become discouraged. You may view involuntary thoughts and bodily tension as informative signs of underlying mental and physical imbalances and learn from them. The unrest you experience in your body and mind is not the real problem. It is symptomatic to the extent to which the whole psychosomatic system is out of tune. Let these symptoms remind you to relax the mind and breathe into areas of tension in your body. So this is something that's going to come up a little bit more later, but just a few comments here and then we'll go to the practice. Is that, of course, when we're doing this practice, any shamatha practice, we'll have all sorts of things coming up in the body, all sorts of things coming up in the mind. And of course, the recommendation is, no matter what's coming up in the body, what's coming up in the mind, don't make a big deal out of it. Because now we tend to make a big deal of it. If we have something unpleasant in the body or mind come up, we go, oh no, go away. And so we develop a lot of aversion, and then of course we get caught up in that. Or sometimes, in fact, when we're doing the practice, we have a lot of pleasant things coming up in the body, pleasant vibrations or sensations, or maybe pleasant thoughts or memories coming up in the mind. And of course we get caught up in them because we go, oh, that's nice, I like that. And we end up getting caught up in them with craving and attachment. And then sometimes some very strange things come up in the body and the mind, and we go, oh, what's that? I don't know what that is. Go away. Maybe you have a lot of anxiety about that. But of course, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant or strange, just let it be there. Don't get caught up in it. These things will come and they'll go, they'll come and they'll go. And just keep to the practice. Otherwise we'll get sidetracked, getting caught up in sensations in the body or experiences in the mind. Just let them be there, leave them be there, and just focus on the object, whatever the object is. And of course at the moment, we're focusing on the actual tactile sensations of the breath in the area of the abdomen. Any questions before we go back to the practice? Okay, so let's go to the practice, focusing again at the abdomen. And this time I'll do less guiding to give you more time to get into the practice. So again, you can bring in counting and noting if you find it helpful and necessary, and just using that bare attention. So let's do the practice. Setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. relaxing more deeply with each out breath. And with each out breath, letting go of any thoughts that may have arisen, happily releasing them. And simply allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment. And simply becoming aware of the rhythm of the breath. Now narrow the focus and focus on the sensations of the breath in the area of the abdomen. And maintaining that ongoing flow of mindfulness of the sensations of the breath throughout the entire cycle of each in and out breath. And then monitor that with introspection, noticing if you're becoming dull or distracted, and if so, adjusting accordingly. So let's continue the practice in silence.